Emperor Thane's warship touched down in the palace courtyard 3 cycles earlier than anyone expected. The massive dragon stepped out, his crimson scales still smoking from the last battle. Scorch marks covered his wings and dried blood stained his claws. He had been fighting on the frontier for 2 full years without rest. The Draconi were the most feared species in the galaxy. Standing 12 feet tall with scales harder than battle armor, they could tear through steel with their bare claws. Their telepathic abilities let them read minds and crush wills. For 3,000 years they had ruled over dozens of worlds. Humans were just one of many servant races they had conquered 50 years ago. Thane expected his palace to be quiet and orderly. His skeleton staff knew the rules. Silence. Discipline. Perfect order. That was the Draconi way. But as he walked through the main gates, he heard something strange. Was that singing? And laughter? Children's laughter? Thane stopped in the middle of the corridor. His golden eyes narrowed. In all his 800 years of life, he had never heard such sounds in his fortress. Draconi hatchlings did not laugh. They trained. They studied war. They learned to be strong through pain and discipline. He followed the sounds through the stone hallways. The singing grew louder. It was a simple, cheerful tune about counting numbers. His confusion turned to anger. Who dared disturb the order of his palace? The sounds led him to his throne room. The massive doors were slightly open. Thane pushed them wide and stepped inside. He could not believe what he saw. 20 Draconi hatchlings sat on colorful cushions arranged in neat rows. They were small, barely 3 feet tall, their scales still soft and bright. They looked up at the front of the room with complete attention. Not because they were afraid. Because they were interested. At the front stood a human woman. She was tiny compared to the hatchlings, barely 5 feet tall. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple tie. She wore the gray uniform of a palace servant. She held up cards with numbers and pictures drawn on them in bright colors. Now, who can tell me what 5 plus 3 equals? She asked in a gentle voice. Several small claws shot up into the air. The hatchlings wiggled with excitement, trying to be picked. Yes, little one? The human pointed at a small green hatchling. 8, Miss Rose? The hatchling chirped happily. Perfect. You're all doing so wonderfully today, Rose said with a warm smile. Thane felt like he had stepped into another world. This could not be real. This could not be happening in his palace. In his throne room. What is the meaning of this? His voice boomed through the chamber like thunder. The effect was instant. The hatchlings went completely silent. Their eyes went wide with fear. The human woman spun around so fast she nearly dropped her cards. Her face went pale white. And my lord, she stammered. You weren't supposed to return until next cycle. Answer my question, human. Thane's voice was cold and hard. What have you done to these hatchlings? Rose Bennett stood frozen for a moment. Her hands shook, but she did not run. She straightened her back and lifted her chin, even though her knees were trembling. I'm teaching them, my lord, she said quietly. They're war orphans. Their parents died in the frontier battles. They were scheduled to go to the military creches next month. Thane knew about the military creches. Every Draconi did. Orphaned hatchlings were sent there for brutal training. Only the strong survived. Only about 40% made it through the first year. It had always been this way. It made warriors strong. So you decided to, what? Fill their heads with songs and games. Thane growled. I started a school, my lord, Rose said, her voice getting a bit stronger. They needed help. They were suffering. So I used my salary to buy supplies and I've been teaching them every evening for the past 3 months. Thane stared at her. A human, a servant, had taken it upon herself to interfere with Draconi tradition. The punishment for this was death. But something stopped him from ordering her immediate execution. The hatchlings looked healthy. Their scales were shiny and bright. Their eyes were clear and alert. They sat with good posture and showed discipline, even while enjoying themselves. In military creches, hatchlings looked thin and scared. Many were covered in scars from training wounds. These hatchlings looked happy, strong, well-fed. All of you leave. Now, Thane commanded. The hatchlings scrambled to their feet and ran toward the door. But one small female hatchling paused as she passed Rose. She looked up at the human with big, grateful eyes. Thank you, Miss Rose, the little one whispered before running out. Thane watched this exchange carefully. Gratitude. A Draconi hatchling was showing gratitude. He had never seen such a thing before. In Draconi culture, showing appreciation was seen as weakness. You expected others to do their duty. You thanked no one. When the last hatchling left, Thane looked back at Rose. She stood alone in the middle of the throne room, small and fragile. But she did not look away from his eyes. "You will report to my study tomorrow morning," Thane said. "You will bring all records of what you have done. Every detail. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lord," Rose replied. "Go." Rose bowed and hurried from the room. When she was gone, Thane stood alone in his throne room, surrounded by colorful cushions and learning cards. His mind was full of questions. What had this human done? And why did it seem to be working? The next morning Rose stood in Emperor Thane's private study. Her hands still trembled, but she had prepared for this moment. She carried a stack of papers and a data tablet. She had barely slept, but her eyes were determined. Thane sat behind a massive desk made of black stone. His golden eyes watched her every move. The room was dark except for a few glowing crystals that lit the space with blue light. "Speak," Thane commanded. Rose placed her tablet on the desk and activated it. A holographic screen appeared, showing charts and numbers. 3 months ago, I found these 20 hatchlings in the lower wing," she began. Her voice was quiet but steady. They were orphans from the frontier wars. They were scared, thin and sick. In 1 month, they were supposed to go to the military creches. She pulled up more data. "I researched the creche system. The survival rate is 40% in the first year. That means 12 of these children would die. I couldn't accept that." "So you interfered?" Thane said flatly. "Yes, my lord. I used my salary to buy food supplements, learning materials and medical supplies. I started teaching them in the evenings after my regular duties." Rose swiped through the screen showing before and after medical scans. "Look at this. When I found them they were malnourished. Now their health has improved by 40%. Their scales are stronger. Their bones are denser." Thane leaned forward, studying the data carefully. He could not deny what the numbers showed. "Their knowledge retention is 95%, Rose continued. "In military academies it's only 60%. They're learning faster and remembering more." "How?" Thane demanded. Rose took a deep breath. "Because I'm not teaching through pain and fear. Humans learned something important in our history, my lord. We had so many wars on Earth. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. We learned that teaching through trauma doesn't create strong minds. It creates broken ones." She pulled up video recordings. They showed the hatchlings working together to solve puzzles. They helped each other. They asked questions freely. They smiled while learning. "I teach them cooperation, not just competition. I help them process their grief over losing their parents. I answer their questions instead of punishing them for asking. And they're thriving." Thane watched the videos in silence. What he saw challenged everything he believed about Draconi education. These hatchlings were solving problems that typically stumped much older students. And they were doing it together. "You are human," Thane said slowly. "Your species is weak. Short-lived. You have no natural weapons, no telepathy, no strength. Why should I believe your methods are better than ours?" Rose met his eyes. "Because we're so weak we had to get smart. We had to learn to work together or die. Every human child must be educated well because we only live about 80 years. We don't have thousands of years like you do. We have to make every generation count." Thane stood and walked to the window. He looked out over his empire, thinking hard. "I will observe your teaching," he said finally. "For 1 week. Then I will decide your fate." For the next 7 days, Thane watched Rose work with the hatchlings. He hid himself and observed without interfering. He saw her teach them mathematics through games that made them laugh. He saw her help a small hatchling who was struggling with reading, sitting patiently until the child understood. He saw her organize group projects where hatchlings had to work as teams. Most surprising of all, he saw her teach them emotional control. She had them draw pictures of their feelings. She let them talk about missing their parents. She taught them that sadness was not weakness, but something to understand and move through. The hatchlings loved her. More than that, they respected her. Not because they feared her but because she cared about them. On the 7th day, Thane was ready to make his decision. But that morning, everything changed. High Elder Morn arrived at the palace with 4 other council members. They swept through the corridors like a storm. Their scales were dark with anger. "Where is the human?" Morn demanded. Thane stepped out to meet them. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" "We received reports," Morn hissed. "Reports that a human servant has been teaching Draconi hatchlings. Teaching them weakness. Filling their heads with soft human ideas." "I am aware of the situation," Thane said coldly. "Then you know she must be executed immediately," another elder shouted. "This is a violation of our most sacred traditions. She is contaminating our youth. The commotion drew Rose from the throne room. She appeared in the doorway with the hatchlings behind her. When she saw the elders, she understood immediately. Someone had reported her. "Miss Rose," one of the small hatchlings cried out in fear. "It's all right," Rose said softly to them. "Go to your rooms. Everything will be fine." But she did not believe her own words. Her face was pale as she walked forward to face the council. "I am Rose Bennett," she said quietly. "I'm the one you're looking for." "You admit your crime?" Morn growled. "I admit I've been teaching children who needed help," Rose replied. "If that's a crime, then yes, I'm guilty." Thane watched this small human stand before 5 massive dragon lords. She was terrified. He could smell her fear. But she did not run. She did not beg. She stood her ground to protect the hatchling she had been teaching. "She will face trial," Thane announced. "Before the full Grand Council. 3 days from now." Morn looked like he wanted to argue, but Thane's rank as Emperor could not be challenged directly. 3 days, Morn agreed. But justice will be served. This human will die for her crimes. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of draconi filled the stone seats that rose up in circular rows. At the center stood a small platform. That was where Rose would stand for her trial. Rose walked down the long path to the platform. Every eye watched her. She could hear the whispers. Some were curious. Most were angry. A human daring to interfere with draconi tradition? It was unthinkable. She climbed onto the platform and stood alone. Above her, seated on the highest throne, was Emperor Thane. His face showed nothing. Around him sat the 12 members of the Grand Council, the most powerful draconi in the Empire. High Elder Morn stood to present the charges. His voice echoed through the chamber. "This human stands accused of corrupting draconi youth. She has taught them weakness. She has filled their minds with soft human ideas that go against our traditions. For 3,000 years, we have trained our young through strength and discipline. She has tried to undo this with games and songs and emotional nonsense." The crowd roared in agreement. Rose felt very small. "The penalty for such crimes is death," Morn continued. "I call for immediate execution. The human will be allowed to speak in her defense," Thane said from his throne. His voice was calm but firm. Morn looked angry but sat down. Rose was given a small device that would project her voice throughout the chamber. "Honorable Council," Rose began. Her voice shook at first but grew stronger. "I do not deny what I have done. I taught 20 draconi hatchlings. I fed them. I cared for them. And yes, I used human methods." "You admit your crime then?" an elder called out. "I admit I helped children who were suffering," Rose replied. "Elder Morn is right about one thing. Humans are weak. We live maybe 80 or 90 years. You live for thousands. We have no claws, no scales, no telepathy. We are small and fragile." She paused and looked around the chamber. "Do you know what that taught us? It taught us to make every single moment matter. It taught us that we cannot survive alone, so we must work together. It taught us to innovate because we have no natural weapons. It taught us to care deeply because our time is so short." Rose activated her data tablet. Holographic screens appeared around her, visible to everyone in the chamber. "These are the 20 hatchlings I taught. When I found them 3 months ago, they were sick. Scared. 12 of them would have died in the military creches within a year. Look at them now." The screens showed medical data, test results, and performance metrics. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Knowledge retention, 95% compared to 60% in your academies. Physical health, improved by 40%. Survival rate, 100%. 0 deaths. Whispers spread through the crowd. Some draconi leaned forward to see the data more clearly. "But that's not all," Rose continued. She played video footage. It showed the hatchlings working together to solve a complex engineering puzzle. They communicated. They helped each other. They figured out the solution in half the time it usually took adult draconi. "Your species is strong," Rose said. "But you've been taught to work alone. To compete with each other. To see asking for help as weakness. Humans learned that cooperation multiplies strength. One human is weak. But humans working together? We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and we reached the stars." Elder Morn stood up angrily. "This is just pretty words. What is your real goal, human? Why should we trust you?" Rose looked directly at him. "My goal is simple. I want to prove that strength and compassion are not opposites. You have ruled through fear for 3,000 years. But humans learned something important. The strongest civilizations are not built on fear and domination. They are built on cooperation and care. She pulled up one final image. It showed a small draconi hatchling helping an even smaller one learn to read. This is what I taught them. Not weakness. Not softness. I taught them that helping others makes you stronger, not weaker. That asking questions shows intelligence, not ignorance. That processing grief makes you healthier, not broken. The chamber fell silent. Even the angry whispers stopped. You say I contaminated your youth, Rose said, her voice ringing clear. I say I helped them become the best versions of themselves. You say I taught them weakness. I say I taught them a different kind of strength. The kind that lasts. The kind that builds empires instead of just conquering them. She looked up at Thane. I am just one human. One weak, short-lived, fragile human. But I saw children who needed help and I could not walk away. Maybe that is stupid. Maybe that will get me killed. But that is what humans do. We see suffering and we try to fix it, even when it is dangerous. Rose turned back to the council. Do what you will with me. But please, do not punish those hatchlings for learning to be kind as well as strong. The chamber erupted into arguments. Some elders shouted for her execution. Others demanded to see more data. The crowd was divided. Thane raised his hand and silence fell immediately. I will announce my judgment tomorrow at dawn, he said. This council is dismissed. As Rose was led away by guards, she looked back one last time. She saw Thane watching her with an expression she could not read. Was it respect? Curiosity? Or had she just sealed her own fate? That night, Thane could not sleep. He walked through the empty halls of his palace, his claws clicking on the stone floors. His mind was full of questions that had no easy answers. He went to his private library and accessed the Imperial database. He searched for information about humans. Not just military reports or conquest records. He wanted to know their history, their culture, how they had survived. What he found shocked him. Earth had nearly been destroyed dozens of times. Ice ages that should have killed them. Diseases that wiped out half their population. Wars so terrible that entire cities vanished in moments. Yet humans kept rebuilding. They kept trying. They never gave up. Thane found records of human achievements. They went from primitive tribes to spacefaring civilization in only 10,000 years. The Draconi had taken 100,000 years to do the same thing. How was that possible? He dug deeper. He found the answer in how humans raised their children. Because humans lived such short lives, they had to pass knowledge down perfectly. They could not waste time. Every generation had to learn fast and learn well. So humans invented schools, universities, teaching methods designed to help children learn quickly and remember everything. They studied how the brain worked. They learned that fear and pain made learning harder, not easier. Thane sat back in his chair. For 800 years, he had believed that Draconi methods were the only way, the best way. Strength through suffering. Power through pain. But the data from Rose's hatchlings did not lie. They were learning faster, growing stronger, developing skills that should take years to master. He thought about his own childhood in the military creches, the beatings when he failed, the hunger used as punishment, the constant fear. Yes, it had made him strong. But how many of his brothers and sisters had died? More than half his group had not survived. What if there was a better way? Just before dawn, Thane made his decision. He knew it would change everything. But Rose had been right about one thing. True strength was knowing when to change. When the sun rose, the council chamber filled again. Rose was brought in, her hands bound. She looked tired but calm. She had accepted whatever fate awaited her. Thane entered and took his throne. Every eye turned to him. I have studied the evidence, Thane began. His voice carried through the chamber. I have reviewed the data. I have watched the hatchlings. And I have researched human history and culture. He stood, his massive form towering over everyone. Rose Bennett, you are accused of violating our sacred traditions. This is true. You did interfere with our ways. Rose closed her eyes, preparing for the death sentence. However, Thane continued, you have also achieved something remarkable. Something we Draconi have failed to do for 3,000 years. You have taught our children to be strong and intelligent, powerful and wise. You have proven that compassion and strength are not enemies. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Elder Morn jumped to his feet. This is outrageous. Morn shouted. You cannot seriously be considering. I am not considering anything, Thane interrupted, his voice like thunder. I have decided. Rose Bennett is pardoned. All charges are dismissed. The chamber exploded into chaos. Some Draconi roared in approval. Others shouted in anger. Elder Morn's face turned dark red. Thane was not finished. Furthermore, I name Rose Bennett as Chief Education Architect of the Crimson Throne. She will help redesign our education system. You cannot do this. Morn screamed. This violates everything we stand for. Thane's eyes fixed on the elder. Any council member who objects to my decision may face me in personal combat. Here. Now. The chamber went silent. Draconi culture respected one thing above all else: strength in battle. Thane was the emperor because he had defeated every challenger. No one wanted to fight him. Elder Morn sat down slowly, his jaw clenched in fury. But Thane had one more announcement. This was the dangerous part. The part that could cost him everything. I propose an empire-wide experiment, he said. We will integrate human teaching methods into all Draconi schools across every world we control. A 5-year trial period. The council erupted again. This time even some of Thane's supporters looked shocked. If the experiment fails, Thane continued, speaking over the noise, if our children become weak or our empire suffers, then execute both Rose Bennett and myself. I will submit to death willingly. That got everyone's attention. An emperor offering his own life? It was unheard of. But if it succeeds, Thane said, his voice firm, if our children become stronger, smarter, and healthier, then humans will be granted equal citizenship status in the Crimson Empire. They will no longer be servants. They will be partners. The chamber fell into stunned silence. Equal citizenship? For humans? The idea was revolutionary. Dangerous. Insane. Elder Morn found his voice. You are betting the entire empire on the word of one human? You are risking our way of life. Yes, Thane said simply. Because she has already proven her methods work. Because our way has cost us thousands of young lives. And because true strength is having the courage to change when change is needed. He looked around at the council. This is my decision as your emperor. Those who support it, stand. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one elder stood. Then another. Then more. Not all of them, but enough. More than half the council rose to their feet. Morn remained seated, glaring at Thane with pure hatred. The vote passes, Thane declared. The experiment begins immediately. Guards removed Rose's chains. She stood there, free, unable to believe what had just happened. She had expected death. Instead, she had been given the power to change an entire empire. Thane descended from his throne and approached her. He towered over her small frame. Then, in front of the entire council, he placed one massive clawed hand gently on her shoulder. It was the highest honor a Draconi could give. You showed me that my empire was built on fear, Thane said quietly so only she could hear. Now show me how to build it on something better. You have 5 years, Rose Bennett. Do not waste them. Rose looked up at the Dragon Emperor. I won't let you down, my lord. I know, Thane said. That is why I chose you. The changes started slowly at first. Rose trained hundreds of Draconi teachers in human education methods. She traveled to different worlds, setting up new schools. She wrote textbooks that combined Draconi strength training with human emotional intelligence. Many Draconi resisted at first. They said the old ways were better. They complained that children were becoming soft. But then the results started coming in. The first year showed a 20% improvement in learning. The second year showed 40%. By the third year, the data was undeniable. Children taught with Rose's methods were not just smarter. They were healthier, stronger, and more creative than any generation before them. The blood rage that had plagued Draconi warriors for thousands of years started to disappear. This was a condition where adult Draconi would lose control and attack everything around them. It had always been considered part of their nature. But Rose discovered it was actually caused by childhood trauma. When children were raised with care and emotional support, the blood rage decreased by 70%. The military academies that had once killed 40% of students now had a survival rate of 98%. And the graduates were better soldiers, not worse. They could think strategically, work in teams, and make complex decisions under pressure. But the biggest change was not in the numbers. It was in how the Crimson Empire interacted with other species. Under Rose and Thane's combined leadership, the Empire stopped conquering through war. Instead, they offered other species a deal. Join us willingly. We will share our technology. We will protect you. We will educate your children. In return, become our allies. Species that had feared the Draconi for generations suddenly saw them differently. The terrifying dragon warriors were now negotiating? Offering help? It seemed impossible. But it worked. 12 new species joined the Empire peacefully in 5 years. More than the Draconi had conquered in the previous 50 years of war. The galaxy watched in shock as the Crimson Empire transformed from a conquering force into a cooperative coalition. On the 5th anniversary of the experiment, Rose stood on a balcony overlooking the central plaza of the capital city. Below her, thousands of children played together. Draconi hatchlings ran alongside human children. There were also Quilix younglings with their 4 arms, and Ventari children with their blue skin and fins. The school that had started with 20 orphans now had branches on 40 worlds. Millions of children learned together regardless of their species. Rose heard heavy footsteps behind her. She did not need to turn around. She knew that sound. The council voted this morning, Emperor Thane said, coming to stand beside her. The results are final. Rose felt her heart beat faster. This was the moment. 5 years had passed. The experiment was over. Now came the judgment. The education reforms are being made permanent, Thane continued. And the council has voted to grant humans full citizenship status throughout the Empire. Rose closed her eyes. Relief flooded through her. They had done it. They had actually done it. There is more, Thane said. 17 other species have asked to join the Empire this month alone. Word has spread across the galaxy about what we are building here. They want to be part of it. Rose looked up at the massive dragon beside her. I still cannot believe this worked. I can, Thane replied. You told me 5 years ago that humans are stubborn. That you believe things can get better even when all evidence says otherwise. You were right. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the children play below. A small Draconi hatchling helped a human child climb onto a high platform. The human child laughed and thanked her dragon friend. I have a question, Thane said quietly. Something I have wondered for 5 years but never asked. What is it, my lord? You were a servant when you came here. Property. I could have killed you at any moment. Why did you risk everything for our children? You barely knew us. We had conquered your world. Why did you care? Rose smiled. She had known this question would come eventually. She turned to face Thane directly. Because that is what humans do, she said simply. We see children suffering anywhere of any species and we cannot help ourselves. We have to try to fix it. Even when it is stupid. Even when it is dangerous. Especially then. She looked back at the playing children. You Draconi are powerful, my lord. You can live for thousands of years. You have strength and weapons and telepathy. But humans? We have something different. We have hope. We believe, against all logic and reason, that tomorrow can be better than today. That kindness is not weakness. That love is the strongest force in the universe. She paused. Sometimes that belief saves the galaxy. Thane was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something Rose had never seen before. The great dragon emperor, conqueror of worlds, bent down and placed his forehead gently against her hand. It was a gesture of deepest respect in Draconi culture. Recognition of an equal. Then teach us this hope, Rose Bennett, Thane said softly. Teach us to believe in better tomorrows. My empire needs it. The galaxy needs it. Rose placed her other hand on his scaled head. I already am, my friend. One child at a time. Below them, the plaza filled with more laughter. Different species, different worlds, all learning and playing together. The Crimson Empire, once built on conquest and fear, was being rebuilt on something far more powerful. Hope, compassion, and the stubborn human belief that things could always get better. All because one human maid had refused to accept that any child, anywhere, deserved to suffer.